woman who walks alone with no husband by her side is a figure etched into the tapestry of human history, sometimes celebrated, often misunderstood, but always enduring. Her journey is not defined by absence, but by presence, the presence of courage, self-reliance, and an unyielding commitment to carve her own path in a world that has long tried to script her story for her. To speak of such a woman is to speak of resilience in the face of societal expectations, of quiet rebellion against norms that equate a woman's worth with her marital status, and of the quiet, profound power of choosing oneself. For centuries, women have been told that their lives are incomplete without a partner. Cultural narratives, religious doctrines, and even legal frameworks have reinforced the idea that a woman's ultimate purpose lies in marriage and motherhood. To deviate from this path has often meant facing scrutiny, pity, or outright condemnation. And yet, across time and geography, women have defied these conventions. They have built lives of meaning and impact without the anchor, or as some might argue, the weight of a husband. These women are not exceptions to a rule, but proof that the rule itself is flawed. They are pioneers, artists, leaders, and everyday heroes who remind us that fulfillment is not a one-size-fits-all endeavor. Consider the stories that history has preserved, often in fragments. There was Enheduanna, the high priestess of ancient Mesopotamia, who composed hymns to the goddess Inanna and is considered the world's first named author. She wielded spiritual and political influence in a society where power was deeply patriarchal. Yet her legacy survives not as a wife or mother, but as a thinker and poet. Centuries later, Sappho of Lesbos wrote verses that celebrated love and longing. Her voice so resonant that Plato called her the 10th muse. Though fragments of her work remain, her influence on literature and culture is immeasurable. These women did not need husbands to define their contributions. Their minds and voices were enough. Even in more recent history, women who walked alone have shaped the world. Florence Nightingale revolutionized nursing and public health, prioritizing her calling over the domestic life expected of a Victorian-era woman. Emily Dickinson, whose reclusive existence in Amherst produced some of the most profound poetry in the English language, found her muse in solitude. Rosa Parks, a seamstress and activist, stood, or rather sat, against racial injustice, her courage catalyzing a movement. None of these women relied on a husband's name or status to amplify their impact. Their power came from within. Yet for every famous name, there are countless untold stories of ordinary women who have lived extraordinary lives on their own terms. The widow who raised children while running a farm, the aunt who became a community leader, the friend who traveled the world with a backpack and a journal. These women, too, are part of the narrative. Their lives are testaments to the fact that solitude is not loneliness, and independence is not isolation. A woman who walks alone is not wandering aimlessly. She is navigating a landscape of her own design. Society, however, has not always been kind to such women. Unmarried women have been labeled spinsters or old maids, terms dripping with condescension and pity. In some cultures, they are seen as burdens or even threats to social order. The pressure to marry can be suffocating, rooted in fears of economic instability, social exclusion, or the perceived tragedy of a life unfulfilled. But these judgments reveal more about societal insecurities than the women they target. A woman's choice to remain unmarried, whether by circumstance or conviction, is not a failure but a reflection of her autonomy. It is a declaration that she refuses to shrink herself to fit into someone else's mold. The modern era has brought both progress and persistent challenges. Today, more women than ever are choosing to delay marriage or forgo it entirely. They pursue education, careers, creative passions, and personal growth without waiting for a partner's permission or presence. Economically, women are more independent, with greater access to resources and opportunities. Yet the stigma lingers. Family gatherings still buzz with questions about when a woman will settle down. Media and pop culture often portray single women as either desperate or cold-hearted, reinforcing outdated stereotypes. The underlying message remains, a woman's life gains legitimacy through marriage. But what if we flipped the script? What if we saw a woman walking alone, not as someone missing a piece, but as someone whole, fully realized and complete? This shift in perspective requires us to confront our own biases. It asks us to celebrate women not for their roles in relation to others, wives, mothers, daughters, but for their humanity, their individuality, their right to exist on their own terms. A woman who chooses solitude is not rejecting love or connection. She is redefining them. She is proof that love can take many forms: friendship, mentorship, self-love, and that partnership is not the sole measure of a life well lived. There is also a profound difference between being alone and feeling lonely. A woman may walk alone and yet be surrounded by a rich tapestry of relationships: friends who are family, colleagues who are allies, communities that uplift her. Her independence does not negate her capacity for connection. It deepens it. When a woman is not compelled to center her life around a partner, she has the freedom to pour her energy into causes, hobbies, and relationships that align with her values. She becomes a curator of her own existence, prioritizing quality over convention. Consider the emotional labor often expected of women in relationships. Traditionally, women have been socialized to nurture, accommodate, and compromise, to prioritize others' needs above their own. A woman walking alone reclaims that energy. She decides how to spend her time, where to invest her love, and what boundaries to set. This is not selfishness. It is self-respect. It is the recognition that she cannot pour from an empty cup and that her worth is not tied to how much she sacrifices for others. Of course, this path is not without its challenges. Societal safety nets are still built around the assumption of family units. Single women may face discrimination in housing, healthcare, or financial planning. Aging without a spouse or children can raise legitimate concerns about care and support in later years. These systemic issues highlight the need for broader cultural shifts, not just in attitudes, but in policies that recognize diverse family structures and ensure that no one is left vulnerable because they chose to walk alone. Yet even in the face of these obstacles, women have demonstrated remarkable ingenuity. They build networks of mutual aid, create businesses, and advocate for reforms. They challenge the notion that vulnerability is weakness, showing instead that it is a catalyst for resilience. A woman who walks alone learns to rely on herself, but she also learns when to ask for help, a skill that strengthens communities rather than diminishing her strength. There is also a spiritual dimension to this journey. Solitude can be a space for introspection, creativity, and growth. Many women who embrace singlehood speak of a deeper connection to their inner selves, a clarity that comes from quiet moments of reflection. Without the noise of societal expectations, they hear their own voices more clearly. They discover passions they might have suppressed, dreams they might have abandoned, and strengths they never knew they had. In this way, walking alone becomes an act of self-discovery, a pilgrimage to the core of one's identity. It is worth acknowledging that not all women who walk alone do so by choice. Circumstance, loss, divorce, economic necessity can thrust solitude upon them. Yet even in these cases, there is power in how they navigate their new reality. A widow rebuilding her life after grief, a divorcee rediscovering her identity, a woman escaping an oppressive relationship. These stories are not tragedies, but testaments to the human spirit's capacity to adapt and thrive. They remind us that resilience is not the absence of pain, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it. Critics might argue that celebrating singlehood undermines the value of marriage, but this is a false dichotomy. Honoring women who walk alone does not diminish those who choose partnership. It simply affirms that both paths are valid. The goal is not to pit one against the other, but to expand the narrative so that all women feel seen, regardless of their relationship status. Marriage can be a beautiful union, but it is not the only way to live a meaningful life. Diversity in how we love and live enriches us all. In literature and art, the image of a solitary woman has often been romanticized or villainized. Think of the tragic Ophelia or the mysterious spinster in a Gothic novel. But real life is far more nuanced. A woman walking alone is neither a pitiable figure nor a sinister one. She is complex, multifaceted, and entirely human. She may wear solitude like a shield or a sanctuary, but it does not define her. Her story is not a footnote. It is a manifesto. As we look to the future, the conversation around women and singlehood must evolve. Younger generations are increasingly questioning traditional milestones, seeking lives that prioritize personal fulfillment over societal checkbox. This is not a rejection of love or family, but an expansion of what those concepts can mean. It is a recognition that fulfillment is not a destination, but a journey, one that each person must map for themselves. To the women who walk alone, know this: your journey is valid. Your choices are valid. The road may be less traveled, but it is paved with the courage of those who came before you and the promise of those who will follow. You are not an outlier. You are a trailblazer. And to those who witness her journey, families, friends, policymakers, strangers, the call is clear. Listen to her stories, honor her autonomy, and create a world where every woman can walk the path she chooses, hand in hand with others or proudly on her own, without judgment or fear. For in the end, the woman who walks alone is not walking away from anything. She is walking toward herself, and in doing so, she illuminates a path for us all.